Welcome back to part whatever of Introduction to Bladesmithing videos. This time I decided that it would be best to get into different types of steel. So we talked about hammers, but now let's talk about what kind of metal you want to use in order to make, let's say, a quality blade, like perhaps a sword or a knife. Now for bladesmithing, it's very important that you choose the right kind of material, because if you were to go to your local hardware store and just buy the right size of steel and then start hammering on it, then you would be able to make it look like a quality blade. It'll shine just like the best steel out there. But upon further use, you're going to see that it's not going to perform very well at all. The reason being is that it's just a plain, simple type of steel, and it's really not going to hold up to the abuse that blade steel needs. For instance, this is just your typical type of steel, right from the hardware store. You can shape it into pretty much anything. However, if you take it and then you bend it, even if it's heat treated, which this piece is, it won't hold its original shape because it has very low carbon content. I don't know the exact carbon content, but that's louder than I thought. It's not the right amount. It's just a plain, simple steel. Other things like the rods you'll find there, they're great for different things, such as basic blacksmithing. You can use low carbon steels for guards and pommels and all the other stuff that doesn't need to perform like the blade of whatever you're working on. So, don't do this at home. What you need to get in order for a quality blade is some type of steel that has a high carbon content. Now, what is that? Okay, so one of the most basic steels, in a good way, high carbon steels, is 1095. Now, you don't really need to go through and memorize all the different types of steel necessarily. Just research the steel for your application. That's one of the reasons why 1095 is so popular and so common. This is, or it has, 0.9, give or take, percent carbon. Now it doesn't sound like a lot, it's not even 1%, but that is actually a very good amount of carbon. And what that allows for steel is that it makes the blade strong, and it makes it able to sharpen very well, and it helps it hold that edge under abuse, because that carbon keeps it strong. Now again, with some of the other steel that's just plain, you can make it look wonderful, but then you take it and you'll whack it on a tree, the blade will bend and the edge will bend and chip or whatever, because it's not a quality steel. There's other types of steel though. It's not just 1095. There's also spring steel. This is actually from a leaf spring from an old truck. A side note, if you're going to use leaf spring, while it is a high carbon steel, it can have a memory, so you'll notice it's bent. If you then go and straighten it, there's a chance that upon use it'll retain the memory of its original shape, but that's not necessarily going to happen. Also, probably a bigger problem with spring steel is that if you use it from an old truck or whatever, there could be lots of micro cracks in it. So it's kind of a gamble. I've used lots and lots of spring steel in experimentation. The newer it looks, the much better it's performed. I've got some that were buried in the ground and just completely rusted away. And I cleaned it all up. I ground off all the rust and all the pocks, and then I abused them to test them. And sure enough, some of them broke because they had micro cracks. You'll see it that when you quench it, and then later it'll break, you'll see where it broke, rust on the inside, because there was cracks where moisture got in and then rusted away. Even though you pretty much polish it up and you can't see it, there could still be cracks. So don't rely too heavily on old spring steel. Salvaged spring steel. Just a side note. However, put this down. If you want to make a smaller blade, there's pros and cons to every single type of steel. 1095, while it is a very popular steel and a high quality type of material, it has pros and cons as well. For instance, while it is nice and sharp, easy to get sharp, and it's nice and hard, it's got a very simple heat treat quench and thermal, all that. It's simple to do. It has some cons as well. It's not as hard as other types of steel, perhaps D2. It won't get as sharp, or it doesn't handle moisture near as well, especially as compared to 440 stainless. However, stainless rarely can get as hard and sharp as 1095. So also stainless is much more complicated in order to harden the steel, to make it a workable blade. So without getting into it, there's all kinds of different steels out there. There's all kinds of different applications of that steel. Chromium, and then you've got nickel, and you mix it with a high carbon steel, and then you can do low carbon steel with a high carbon core, and you know, Sanmai, Damascus, and all this different stuff you can do. It's very cool, but it can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So, my recommendation for starting into bladesmithing, blacksmithing, yeah, we'll just talk about bladesmithing. So specifically, my recommendation is get yourself some 1095 or 1080, 1085 steel, and just work on that. Get it up to temperature. I just got bit by a bug. Mosquitoes in here. Get it up to temperature. It works very well underneath an anvil or under a hammer on the anvil, and it quenches very well, very simple comparatively, and it's a high quality steel. So 1085, 1095. Get a similar steel like that. Go online. I go on to knifemaking.com, Jantz it's called, and I order it right off there, and it comes in all sorts of sizes and whatnot. So for me, most of my work is with hunting knives and things like that. So I'll get 1/8 thick or 3/16 thick, about 1.5 inches wide, 1095. I recommend that. Start with that. Super easy. Again, 1080 would be as good as well. I would recommend getting 1/8 steel and just work on the little knives. Practice with those. Get really good at making a small EDC, in other words, everyday carry knife, and then you'll be golden. Get to the point where you're confident, and every time you're going to have a quality cutting blade out of your 1095, and then, or whatever type of steel you decided to go with, and then you can start experimenting with other things. But that was what I would say would be a very good choice to get started with bladesmithing, is a simple steel that's high quality, such as 1095, and just make a bunch of them out of that steel. Practice all the time, abuse the blade, make yourself a blade, abuse it, and so on. But we're kind of getting into other stuff, so let's just stick with steels. For now, try that. Now, if you have any questions on any types of metal, though I'm not an expert, I'll do my best to help you out. So just let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any recommendations. And if you want to know more about different types of steel, pros and cons, you can either Google it or just let me know in the comments, and I'll do my best to respond. And also, let me know what you would like the next Introduction to Bladesmithing video to be about, and then I'll try and take care of you. So, Trevor with Barrett Knives. Yeah, I don't have an outro yet, so goodbye.